What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 of Salty Runback, here to be your weekly intake of everything involving North American Developmental League of Legends. Another very busy week for us here. Of course, the NACLQ Open Qualifiers just wrapped, as well as the second week of NACL with the season about a quarter of the way through. And we have so much to talk about on this episode. I am Grapes. That is Hawk. Hawk, how are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, Grapes. I've started my first week of my spring semester. My spring semester starts really late, but I mean, I used my week off last week. We went crazy covering all the NACLQ stuff and everything. Thanks to everyone that tuned in for the post-reveal show breakdown, as well as the co-streams. And Grapes, I think that leads us straight into, we're not just going to be going live on Wednesday this week again.
Yeah, we had a very busy week on Salty Runback. On our Twitch channel, we had, of course, the reveal show reaction, as Hawk alluded to. We got over 5,000 viewers at one point on that show, which was really cool. Thank you, LCS, for the raid, and for Summer for that raid afterwards as well. And then the co-streams were really fun as well. We got to follow Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Wolves, team that we might talk about a little bit later on in the episode, but maybe not so much after that, as well as a lot of other teams to cover what I, again, would consider to be one of the most exciting parts of the NACLQ, which is that open qualifier. But next week, again, we do have a couple of new things as well. We will continue to stream the North American Challengers League Qualifier games. And I believe, Hawk, the way that it's going to work is we're going to get half of the games on our stream, and the other half will be either on twitch.tv/smaxhide or twitch.tv/alkbattery. Again, basically, we will be covering the games that are not on the official Rally Cry stream, in addition to whatever teams are also putting out their own community broadcasts.
Exactly. As we sort of talked about in the past, you know, the comprehensive coverage of the PGCQ that we had last year, now NACLQ, is just not going to quite be the same. So while once Rally Cry gets up and running, there will be some games over there. We as a community have sort of come together, especially like huge shout out to you, Grapes, and Smacks as well. They've really taken amazing leadership, and sort of all of us have pulled together this community effort. We want to stream all the games. We want to showcase talent that isn't going to be on the official broadcast as well. I think over on Smacks' channel, it'll be a little bit more chill, co-stream vibes, if that's sort of your thing. Over here, we'll be making sure to feature, you know, casted games, and as well as, you know, hopefully team streams will be able to get up and running as well. So it's really going to be an amazing community effort. We are going to do everything in our power to cover every single game and upload the VODs places as well, as professionally as possible, while still being, you know, having that fun flair that we always have.
Yeah, of course. First games this Saturday, going to be Team Fish Taco versus Enigma on Summer Stream, as well as Maryville versus Conviction on twitch.tv/saltyrunback, which may be where you're watching the podcast right now. And speaking of the podcast, Hawk, I think we got to get into it because I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of our, I don't know, most exciting episodes yet. I know we've only
been cooking again. We got some stuff to talk about, because, you know, now we're more into it, right? Like, the last couple episodes, it's been early season, lots of speculation. Now we're into it. Now we actually have some storylines to latch on to and really start to talk about, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Let's head into the headlines portion for this third episode of Salty Runback, starting with some content involving the Open Qualifier. As we were talking about before, we covered some games. A lot of other people covered some games. Shout out to everybody who was getting coverage on the community streams. But basically, 32 teams, 80 total games, and 16 teams now are leaving in with that spot in the GSL group stage. Hawk, out of all of the matches that we saw over these past couple of days, what was some of your biggest surprises from this Open Qualifier?
Oh, Grapes. I mean, initially, let's start with the super obvious. Conviction, CB Gaming, and Enigma getting into top 16. I mean, I know, you know, every OQ, we've always got a couple teams seated outside the top 16 that do end up making it, but shout out to these teams for really showing up and playing, and especially, Grapes, I think the elephant in the room is CB Gaming, going 3-0 in the first 3 rounds. We won't talk about the last 2 rounds, but auto-qualifying in the first 3 games is absolutely amazing. Taking out Team Fish Taco on their way to qualification, that is absolutely insane. And, I mean, this was a team that we were looking at. Them and Enigma, I think both of us, were sort of looking at this team, and we were like, this could be an interesting team. But we weren't really, you know, we said they would both go 2 and 3, and Conviction as well. And so seeing this team and Enigma come out the gate swinging, for the fences, taking down some big tournament favorites. That is just absolutely awesome to see. You know, Nem9 and Kisno, especially on CB, I think impressed a lot of people. You know, Nem9 has been in the scene for a bit, right? But they popped off. They popped off, and I think harder than they were really expected to.
Yeah, the 3 teams that Hawk mentioned were the 3 teams that were seeded out of the top 16 by the selection committee and made their way in. The other 3 teams that didn't make it, I believe, were the Northern Front, Super Sunshine Fruit Basket Wolves, and the Nameless. And I don't think any of them would necessarily have been like the biggest surprise to see not get out. Like, they were definitely some of the teams that we had on the bubble of potentially getting in or out in some of these situations where an upset did occur. But I think another team that we haven't mentioned yet was Conviction. As a group of people that really nobody saw coming, except for, of course, their general manager, who was in the selection committee and really vouching for the team. But we were there for that 5th game of this that do or die moment for them against UCI, a 51-minute bloodbath, and Nightstar on the Caitlyn just had an absolutely phenomenal performance, and basically carried Conviction all the way over to this top 16 spot. They came in, I believe, as a 24 seed, which is, I think, the lowest that out of any of the teams in this open qualifier to make it in, and you know, that was definitely one of the biggest surprises for me specifically. And if we want to go a little bit more on the negative end, we can talk about a team that maybe had a lot of high expectations, but you know, didn't necessarily meet them. TonyTop, their team went 1-2 through the first 3 games and had to really win out in some pretty close ones to get into the actual tournament. Before, you know, even though they were previously a team that was really expected to be at the top of the table, they lost to CB Gaming, who of course we mentioned before, and also Sea Dogs, who didn't make the tournament at all. So some interesting showings for them. I feel like this team maybe just needs a little bit of extra time to gel before, and hopefully now that they have made it into the round of 16, this is where we see them shine a little bit better. But definitely was interesting to see them on that precipice of getting knocked out really, really early on.
Yeah, Grapes, I got to be honest with you. When you said we were going to talk about the negatives, I thought you were going to talk about Super Sunshine. We saw them play 4 games on our stream. I'm going to be honest with you. I was not very impressed. Love all the players in Super Sunshine. It's probably a good time to say, you know, I'm going to, look, the fact of the show is I'm going to flame a lot of teams. I'm going to flame a lot of players, but don't take it personally. I do want to be friends with all of you. I do think you're all amazing at the game, but you know, it's for the content. I hope you understand. There are some like Twitter clips going around. I think it's fun. I hope you
solid bunch of clips. Yeah.
We're all in good banter here, but yeah, Super Sunshine, not impressed. I know we had RBM on the show after day 1 and he was not very happy with the performance. And I think, after starting the day 02 and day 2, it definitely, a little bit of maybe mental boom happening, something along those lines. But unfortunately, Super Sunshine, they did bow out. But yeah, I do like, you know, TonyTop made the tournament, but didn't look amazing on the way to it. And was a little scary. Also, ISU, I'm not going to say they were surprising, but going 0-2 on day 1, they brought it back with the 3-0 on day 2. There's always one, I feel like, and shout out to them. You know, they would have been one I would have been pretty disappointed if they didn't make the top 16. There's always teams you're disappointed about, right? But they would have been one I would have been disappointed about, and so it's good to see ISU. Maybe a little bit surprising, either that they made it or that they almost didn't, depending on like where your thoughts on them lie. But yeah,
did you see the end of their game 5 against Northern Front?
I did not.
Well, you might want to go back and watch
play
that,
CeeLo immediately after our stream wrapped. So.
If you didn't see it, the last game, it was Northern Front versus ISU for a spot in the GSL.
Right.
And Northern Front was at their Nexus, had 1,000 health remaining on it, and then got completely aced, lost Baron, lost one more fight. Meslo on Camille went absolutely bonkers that game, and they came back and won in about 40 minutes to enter.
Did they top esports it?
A little bit of top esports, but maybe not as extreme. A couple of misplays maybe here and there with some of the auto attacks on the Northern Front end.
No.
Goodshot had a really good game on Ezreal, so I want to shout him out as well. But unfortunately, they will not be in, and instead it will be Redbirds at the 13 seed in Group D, which brings us to our next topic, Hawk. We have the groups for the NACLQ already set up. Which of these 4 groups, as you transition that right there, I want to make sure you get the topic on the screen.
I got this.
What's the group of death out of these 4 groups?
So, I mean, immediately it sort of depends on your definition of group of death. It sort of could be like, what group do you think has just the best overall teams? What group do you think has the most competitive path to getting out of the group? there's a lot of sort of different definitions, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I actually think my definition has changed since we talked about this a little bit last night, because I think there's one sort of like group of death if it's like anyone could get out, but I also think there's a group of death where it's like, ooh, like all these teams might be fallible / have pop-off potential, and like any like even though there's a clear top 2, it's like, I'm not so sold on it. And for me, Grapes, I'm going to actually go with that definition. I'm going to go with the one where it feels like there's a lot of really strong teams in this group, and I'd be really terrified to be seeded into them, maybe because of some surprising underperformances, Grapes. And I'm going to go with Group B. Team Fish Taco, TonyTop, Mirage, and Enigma.
Ooh.
I mean, let's not forget Team Fish Taco and TonyTop. We were just talking about TonyTop, but TFT as well dropped the game to CB. Both these teams dropped games to some lower seeded teams, some teams that you might not have expected them to drop games to. Mirage came out 2-0 in the final 2 rounds to make the tournament 3-2. Enigma, they popped off a little bit unexpectedly as well. Like, when I look at TFT and TonyTop, I'm thinking, I do not want to play against them at all, but yet they're both in the same group together because of some slight underperformances in the Open Qualifier. But Mirage and Enigma are also not teams I'm ready to count out, especially Mirage. Barrack, Hyphy, Ariandel, Good Boy Pacus, like this is a team. We saw it sort of with Pacus on Wildcard Aces last year, right? Like this is a team that could find a random win and get out of this group. So I'm looking at this group to be absolutely a bloodbath potentially, and one that in terms of the most competition, maybe not because all the teams are so close together and that like I'm not super impressed by any of them, but rather there are some really strong teams in this group.
Yeah, this is a really interesting setup. You want to pull up the groups really quickly just in case people aren't entirely sure what's going on? The 16 teams have been seeded into 4 groups based on their Open Qualifier performance as well as their Open Qualifier seeding, which was made by the selection committee. And I feel like, again, this is kind of a conversation that we've been having for a couple of weeks now, where it seems like, the level of competition maybe is not necessarily as high both at the top and at the bottom. And so when it comes down to like teams that we are like really confident on making it into the group stage, making it into the knockout stage, there's not a ton of them. This point.
There's not that many.
I would say there's 1, maybe 2 in each group, and so I think
Grapes. There are literally 3 teams that I feel very confident will make the knockout stage.
Yeah, and that's what makes it a little bit interesting. So if we're talking about group of death, I'm also looking at like the possibility of the players all coming together, and like when each team is at their ceiling, like how high can they go. I'm looking at Group C a little bit here. Native, Team Ambition, Winthrop, and CB. Obviously, CB took down the #1 seed, and if they can repeat that success, it could definitely lead to some really interesting situations. And then Winthrop, of course, made top 4 last spring, and we're going to have a lot more to talk about with these teams in the next segment of our show. But I think that if all 4 of these teams come in at their A game, this could really become an interesting group. And also Group D, which I wouldn't necessarily call the group of death, maybe even more the group of life, because I could see a situation where any of these teams would get in and I wouldn't be super surprised, but I can also see a situation where any of these teams don't make it in and I wouldn't be like, wow, this is insane, literally the most crazy thing I've ever seen, because Horizon has a couple of unknown quantities, both Sappy in the top lane as well as Nidhogg, who hasn't played ton of competitive, as well as DMK role swapping, and obviously they performed pretty well, finishing 4-1, but in this new environment, maybe something could go wrong in these group stages. Supernova, kind of, I feel like is a team with a pretty high floor, but maybe not as high of a ceiling as some of the other teams. And then Lit and ISU, I think both have that pop-up potential as well, but again, wouldn't be surprised to just kind of see them bow out at an earlier stage. Yeah. So I feel like that's more of a group of life than a group of death, but it's again a pretty interesting one to look at.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout to Group D as well. I actually feel like as far as like maybe purely the most competitive group, like if that's your definition of group of death, I do think that's the one I'm looking at. Like I said, I think in terms of like death as in like, oh shit, I don't want to play these guys. Like I'm not looking at Group D, but I think all the teams are pretty well seeded. Like I think Horizon is probably the weakest 1 seed, and ISU is looking like the strongest 4 seed. Also, ISU just feels like the most bullshit. Like they don't listen to the expectations at all. They just do whatever the hell they want. Sometimes they beat really good teams. Sometimes they lose to really terrible teams. I don't know. Like I don't know. Super coin flip teams. So like I agree. I think I want to give a shout to Group D. That to me is like I would not want to predict that. But Group B for me is that group of death. Like, I do not want to be seated in here. For Grapes, Group C, I can see that as well. I know I'm lower on Winthrop than most people. I'm sorry. Look, I know I got flamed on Twitter for it, but I'm still holding my ground here. I'm not hyped on Winthrop, so.
And again, catch all the action Saturday. Some of it will be on this Twitch channel at Salty Runback Pod. And we will be talking about these teams a little bit more again on the second half of our show. But I do think, Hawk, this is a nice little pivot to get into the next section of our show, which we'll be talking a little bit more about the NACL as we wrap up these headlines. Going back to a topic that was a pretty interesting one last week, some of the provisional teams performing pretty well. And Cincinnati Fear and Wildcard both sit still in the top half of the standings. Fear specifically have a very, very good record at this point. I believe they're 7-3. If I am not completely mistaken. But Hawk, these two provisional teams, the ones that kind of got the second choice of rosters and everything like that, are they going to continue to find success throughout the rest of this NACL season?
And it's a really interesting question to sort of try to answer. So just so everyone knows, Wildcard started 4-0, Cincinnati Fear started 4-2. Now after this past week, Cincinnati Fear, as you say, Grapes, 7-3, Wildcard 5-3. And these are very clearly the provisional teams that, at least out of the gate, are having the best success across the board. And it's a really hard question to answer, and it's sort of, I don't know. That's honestly my answer. I thought about this all night. I don't know if they're going to continue to find success. If one is, I am looking at Cincinnati Fear. I mean, now 10 games in, that is 5 out of the 15 series that they're going to play the entire. So they're 1/3 of their games through. They have looked excellent. They've played some great teams like Team Liquid Challenger, who's sort of like the most notable team that they've played against. They've also 2-0'd a couple provisional teams, I think. But this team has just come together so much better than I thought they would. I know Grapes and I both weren't very high on them early on, but Faisal's been popping off in the top lane. The bot lane has looked way better than we thought they would. The whole team seems like it's gelled really well and is playing well together. They look like they've got the strongest fundamentals out of any provisional team, and they could go far. Now, Wildcard is an interesting one for me, Grapes, and they're really such an interesting commodity because we sort of saw them, I think, get exposed by TSM Challengers a little bit in their 0-2 loss, where they clearly have a different way of playing the game and yet have very solid fundamentals. So they're able to beat maybe some less stable teams. And I know TSM Challengers, people are going to be like, well, at the bottom of the standings, I don't think they're that stable, which maybe that's true, but this is a team full of veterans, and I think it's that veterancy that actually makes them less susceptible to the variance that Wildcard put out. And so I'm sort of looking at when Wildcard might play some of these more veteran rosters, some of these more established rosters. Will they continue to find the same success against those kind of teams? Because they've clearly been able to out-hands a lot of teams, but I'm sort of waiting for, is their playstyle sustainable? I'm not sure, Grapes.
Yep, and I mean, as you do say that, Wildcard did 2-0 Immortals, which, they were playing with a Blaze Olive, so you can either call that like an upgrade or a downgrade,
but it's a roster
on just, stability versus skill.
It's a roster filled with people that haven't played together before as much, though, so even though everyone on Immortals was veteran, right, I do think it's a little bit different from TSM, just to interject on that. Does that make sense?
It's a valid point, especially, first week, new sub coming in, wasn't scrimming with the team for a while. Here's my take on this. I think Fear, the way that they have played, they kind of do seem one-dimensional, as you said. They team fight really well. If they get a composition that wombo combos people and they don't fall super behind in the early game, they can outplay you in the team fights. And I think we saw that in the matchup against Immortals. We also saw that, I believe, in their game against Team Liquid First, that they won. But I think the TSM series specifically is where I maybe see a little bit of concern because Moose Hater locked into Garen. Everyone was like, "Oh no, like Moose Hater Garen, it seems unstoppable."
Into Jax, which is the matchup that he wants too.
Right, but then you remember that it's still Garen, and there's ways to play around it. And I think TSM, the way that they played the early game with Vince Garen and Hanser, specifically kind of kiting out the Garen and playing in a way that he wasn't really allowed to be successful, really hurt Wildcard, and obviously they dropped both games of that series relatively soundly, and so I think as the weeks go on and more teams kind of learn how to play against this Wildcard style,
right,
maybe that's where we're starting to see them falter a little bit. And again, they were 1-3 this week, which was of course not as high level as Fear have looked so far, but I do think on the other end, Fear, have looked pretty good all around.
Fear look like they have just a very, very reliable team. And I want to reiterate, I don't think that wildcard is a gimmick team. I don't think they rely on gimmicks to win. Like, watching especially their series against IMT, like, it wasn't like these crazy drafts, like draft gapping IMT. No, they had these crazy drafts, but they played them really well. It's not a gimmick, right? Yeah. But it is, their play style is still different. And if you watch sort of the difference between how Svenskeren and the rest of TSM played against Wildcard as opposed to Chad and how IMT played against Wildcard, I do think there's a stark difference, as we both alluded to.
Yeah, and I know Chad said that was probably the worst League of Legends he has ever played.
I'm not going to lie, it wasn't great, but I won't harp on it.
and I think an interesting parallel to Wildcard could potentially be Cloud9 from last year, where their whole thing was play specifically through topside, and eventually as teams kind of figured that out, C9 looked worse and worse, and coming into playoffs weren't necessarily the strongest team, despite really like showing up at the beginning. And I hope Wildcard proved me wrong, because I do like a lot of the players on their team, and I think that they're
exciting.
Well.
You know, they're doing something different. So
And that's kind of what I'm looking at here. And for Fear, again, topside has looked good, but I specifically just want to shout out Manui and Trevor once again. After really not being high on them at the beginning of this season, at the beginning of this podcast, they have looked amazing, especially in the last series that they played, the one against FlyFam, where Manui and Trevor won out bot lane incredibly hard against Instinct and Sword, who we were coming in anticipating to be one of the strongest amateur provisional bot lanes. And Manui and Trevor just look really good in that regard.
They've really stepped up. They've stepped up for sure. And credit where credit's due on that.
And again, 10 series left for them. Also, the last point that we'll make about these two teams is that they both played 2 provisional teams, so they'll, again, have 3 more to play over the next 5 weeks. And they probably are locked in almost in terms of like the top 2 provisional teams in the regular season. But then when we come down to playoffs, of course, things can change. And as the rest of the provisional teams maybe scale up a little bit more, that's where we can maybe see
I do think AoE against Fear will be a really big series. I have obviously Wildcard already 2-0 to AoE, but AoE is the other provisional team that I think has shown like an ability to compete at the top, right? And AoE has only played Wildcard as far as provisional teams. Like TL First, FlyFam, and CLG Faith, they've had some moments, but I'm pretty sure that they just don't quite have the stuff right now. AoE's that other team that I'm sort of looking at, like they might be able to challenge Fear, so I'm kind of waiting for that series. I don't know when that is, but that might be a big one when it comes around as far as not going to promotion tournament.
Yeah, and again, playoffs are the most important thing at the end of this, but that would be a really good litmus test as we get later on to the season. Let's move on to our next topic, which is actually something that we haven't talked about much, which is surprising on this show. The challenger teams that are performing really well, specifically Cloud9 and Dignitas, who are currently sitting at the top of the standings at 1-2, with Fear very, very close behind them in third. But Dignitas and C9, I feel like were rosters that were kind of criticized a little bit coming into the start of the season. I remember our tier list, we both had them relatively low in terms of how much we liked their roster. But now they're performing really well, and I just want to hear your thoughts on if you think, Hawk, we've been wrong on this decision, or if this is still something that we were expecting out of these teams.
So this is a really interesting question to answer, Grapes, because I think it's a really complicated one, and I want to preface my statement with saying, like, there's a difference between my personal excitement about a roster as a fan with like the difference between that and success, right? And how good I think a roster will be, not just as a roster, but maybe also for the scene, right? And when you look at Cloud9 and Dignitas' rosters, I think the most important thing immediately to say is, like, when you look at the 10 players on these two teams, by and large, I don't think anyone, wherever they'd end up, like, in a vacuum, is going to look at these 10 players and think, like, they shouldn't be on an NACL team. Like, because they're all great players. They're all good. They've established themselves in different regions or in LCS or whatever, and maybe they're washed, whatever you want to say. Like, they all, by and large, deserve to be here. And for whatever reason, when they're all 5 of them put together on the same team, right, that's when people raise an eyebrow and sort of have stronger opinions about the rosters not being as hype. And I mean, that's, like, fair, right? Like, it's okay to not be excited about a roster, but I think it's important to separate that from the fact that Cloud9 and Dig are having a lot of success. And the purpose of an NACL team, we oftentimes talk about developing talent as being the main purpose. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to bring on some crazy rookie like APA or Masu or Sniper and do that, right? You can still develop talent that has been here. They can have a resurgence like Dokla had on CLG last year. They can step up in a new way. They can develop talent by playing against them. These two teams being at the top of the table right now is clearly proving that some of these more hotshot teams, they don't quite have the stuff to compare to Cloud9 and Dig, right? So it is really important to sort of like, I think, give these players, A, the credit that they deserve, that they do deserve to be here. They are good players. And B, like, they're not stealing paychecks, right? That's not how it should be viewed. And they're coming in and they're playing really well because Dig and C9 are sitting at the top of the table.
Yeah, and I think a pretty interesting note before, like, while discussing this topic about these two teams is that both GMs, whether it was, I guess, Jack on Cloud9 or Bakery on Dignitas, each issued a statement on what they thought their goal for their academy teams or challenger teams were going to be. Dignitas said, our goal is to win NACL, and Cloud9's goal is to develop talent. I mean, no, sorry, not develop talent. Cloud9's goal was to get as many people promoted into LCS as they possibly can.
There you go.
Both of these goals are not necessarily what was aligned with either what we were doing on our tier list, which was developing talent, or just like kind of what many people consider the point of academy in general. But I think honestly, like in terms of the goals that they're trying to accomplish, like they're both succeeding. Dignitas, of course, is at the top of the table. Cloud9 have a ton of players who could easily slot into LCS teams right now. I'm thinking of MNS and Zazel specifically. Yep. And honestly, even on Dignitas' side, like their goal is to win, but some of the prospects that, maybe not prospects, but players that they have on their team are looking really good, and are maybe even continuing to improve on where they were last year. I think that XU and Hoon were people that we kind of like disregarded entering this season, but they have both taken significant strides. XU specifically has looked like an absolute maniac in the jungle, just running around in Sejuani and just getting the entire team ahead. And then Tomo and Diamond have kind of carried games on their own down in the bot lane. The fact that Insanity might be one of the quieter members on this Dignitas Challengers team definitely means that something is going right for them. Whether both in terms insane. Of nice. Both in terms of performance and also just like having these players kind of grow and prove that they're LCS ready. And again, when you're here because this is the level below LCS, and if you're still trying to get to that stage, there's no like reason to be mad at these players for taking the opportunities and being here. It's just maybe when we were anticipating the goals of some of these rosters being created, that's maybe where some people are a little bit more confused as why they were created.
Grapes, like I love that you bring up what the GMs said about the purpose of their teams, because especially like when I think about Cloud9 over the years, they're a team notorious for developing players in their farm system and selling them to other teams, right? Like the no refunds to EG, that was like a huge meme, right? But like they are a team that has been pretty well known for using their academy team in a different way because they have such great scouting at the LCS level. I think that's just fair to say as a definitive fact. And I think it's really just to tie this whole conversation up. It's important, and this will lead into our next discussion as well. It's important to not conflate our own personal excitement or lack thereof about a certain roster or player or group of players with whether or not they're good for the scene or fulfilling the purpose or whatever, right? Like that those can be mutually exclusive, and I think C9 and Dig, with them being at the top of the table, with their players looking great, I think it's fair to say, just because we weren't personally excited about these rosters doesn't mean they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and they should be doing it,
Yeah, definitely. And I think it'll be really cool to see how Dig and C9 continue to perform throughout the regular season, and also if any teams are really able to catch up to them as we continue to move forward. Because
like
CLG
right?
Specifically, they had like a crazy game. They should have definitely at least won that first game against Dig before some fuckery happened with them. But again, it's just like these teams with maybe more developing players with rosters that we liked more. It'll be cool to see if they will continue to take that next step and again challenge the top of the table. And speaking of top of the table, this brings us to our last headline of the episode, Hawk. Imports are performing really well in the NACL so far. Specifically, I want to shout out Balulu on Immortals, who made his debut this week and I believe his first game was an 8-0-13 Zoe game, and that was just disgusting. Mir on Team NA Challengers has played really well, as well as Amenez on Cloud9, who may be one of the front runners for best mid in the league right now. And of course, Winsome, who was supposed to be on an academy team, dominated in LCS this past week. Unforgiven has had his moments of really good play and also some maybe questionable play, depending on you could factor jet lag or anything within that as well. And even imports that have been here for a while now. Kevy, who's now in his second split on CLG, had some really great games on Maokai against Dignitas yesterday in their final series. On Saturday or Sunday, whatever the super heavyweight showdown was in that last series. And I think sometimes, Hawk, we forget that a lot of the imports that we bring in are still really hyped up players, and it's really cool to see them performing well in this league right now.
Yeah. I like this headline. This should be taken as something that is awesome. This is so great. And I know a lot of people moan and groan about imports, especially in tier 2, because they think like it should all be about developing NA talent, which, again, we like NA talent. We're big NA talent fans. We want them
a show about
to
NA
do well.
talent.
We have a show dedicated to hyping up NA talent or occasionally shitting on them. But
that's you. I don't know about me. I don't want to leave myself in there with you on that.
Yeah, no. It's again all banter. But yeah, we love NA talent, right? But we love to groan about imports, and again, our own personal lack of excitement can be one thing. But whenever the players like Balulu, Mir, MNS, Unforgiven, like these players come in and they start dominating, we should take this as a amazing thing, because that means we're bringing in talent and making the league better as a whole. Because you know what? For every crappy import that there is to NA, there's another Impact or a Core JJ, players that have undisputably come to NA and made the scene better. And so we should welcome these imports that are coming in and trashing our players, because this is going to make the scene better. For every mid laner that gets dunked on by MNS, they're going to go back to VOD review and they're going to learn something, right? And they're going to play better. And it's just, it elevates the play of the league, and they then, they can get promoted, elevate the play overall. And also, it's just fun to watch. It's fun to watch players do well, and we should always celebrate the successes of players no matter where they come from, Grapes. And so I'm super excited about the players that you listed. I am so happy just to see that there are players that have come in and they're dominating, whether or not they're rookies that have been promoted from NA or imports that have come over or whatever.
I think the important distinction here is not necessarily in what region or what country that these players are originally from. It might be more towards the idea of how long they've been in the league, and if their ceiling really is playing at the LCS level, which is of course the eventual goal for a lot of the players that are within this league. If you're bringing in somebody, not to call any names, but like ADD, who's been part of the LCK and now the LLA for like 7+ years, it's hard to imagine a situation where he would maybe grow into an LCS level player to be plugged into that team. But then on the other hand, somebody like MNS or Mir or Unforgiven, who definitely have that ceiling of making it into LCS and being one of the top players in the league, that is where the imports get exciting. You think of Berserker or Core JJ, as you mentioned before, as people that are similar to that. And of course, we love to highlight North American talent, but it's also important to consider like who would potentially be taking the places of some of these players. I know like mid lane specifically, there's not, I feel like a lot of the options of players that could have gotten promoted kind of all did get promoted. You can look at maybe like if you're looking at anybody, it might be like Messages or Town or Toasty Alex, but none of those are really like, oh, they deserve to be at academy level.
Yeah, I think, players like that, I am perfectly comfortable with being in an NACLQ, at least for another split, right? And also, we're talking about mid laners too. Like a player like MNS, he's playing at an LCS level right now, but when MNS came over, there was a lot of speculation about like his behavior issues or whatever, team chemistry that he's had in the past. And so there is still like a developmental aspect about this. It's not like Cloud9, for example, with MNS just brought over like Faker and is like putting him in academy. No, like they're developing this player for one reason or another. So even if he's cracked out in styling on all the other mids, like there's a reason that they didn't feel he was LCS ready or whatever. They got Diplex as well. And so again, like just because MNS is from EMEA, like it doesn't mean that there's not a reason for him to play in NACL and develop. And as you said, Grapes, like again, love Messages, big Messages stan. I've talked about that. Like he's so new, and I feel like playing an NACLQ on a top team like Native, that's going to be great for the development of that player. So why not bring somebody over?
Yep, of course. Have to shout out Fnatic as being a player that probably is deserving, but that besides the point.
Pour one out for Fnatic.
It's a pour one out for Fnatic, but you shouldn't blame the people that necessarily took their spots because they're
not at
also
all.
very, very deserving. That's going to do it for our headlines portion of today. Our second portion of the show is going to be a really interesting one, Hawk. We're going to be taking the 16 teams that have qualified into the GSL group stage of NACLQ and going to be comparing them in a bit of an interesting way. We'll see you on the flip side. We're here in the second portion of the third episode of Salty Runback, and we got to talk about the NACLQ group stages, Hawk, which are starting this weekend. 16 teams made it to the Open Qualifier, and interestingly enough, there are also 16 teams in the NACL. I think you can see where this is going, but if not, Hawk, tell us what we're doing today.
Well, okay, Grapes. We here on NACL, on Salty Runback, want to play a little matchmaker with our teams. We know it's not Valentine's Day yet, but basically 16 teams in NACLQ, 16 teams in the big show in NACL. What if we likened these NACLQ teams to the NACL teams? Now, it could be for any reason. Maybe it's the players that are on it. Maybe it's how good they are. Maybe it's the narrative surrounding them. Who knows? But Grapes and I both went through, did our own list, and we're going to take you all through one by one. And this should be a fun way where we get to talk sort of about both the NACLQ teams as well as the NACL teams, all 16 of them in one go.
Yeah, the goal is to try to familiarize people with these NACLQ teams as much as possible, because we know the NACL has a lot more noticeable names and teams and viewership. And so if you're trying to get into the NACLQ and want kind of a basis of what to expect out of these teams, maybe comparing them to a team in the NACL could help you get that groundwork going. So we have,
also,
again...
It's fun.
And it's fun. We get to banter and maybe make some funny jokes. I know I have a couple of funny ones in here. So
you have pre-prepared. Wow. Okay. I'm feeling outdone on my prep right now.
Not like it's. You'll
Grapes
see,
is like pulling out like
down the line a little bit.
The cue cards,
Let's start off with our first team. We're gonna go through group order, so the teams that were in the groups that we were discussing earlier on in the show. Starting off with our number 1 seed, Maryville University, who made it all the way through the groups, the Open Qualifiers, at a 5-0 record. Hawk, what team do you have to compare to NACL in the NACL to Maryville?
All right, Grapes. Well, I think we both have the same one for this one, and I think it's pretty obvious. I have a Cloud9 Challenger for this roster, and honestly, like I feel like the logic is probably pretty similar for both of us here, where they brought in a bunch of players that have been around for a little bit, as we talked about, not inherently a bad thing at all, and actually I'm kind of hyped about a lot of the players that have been around for a while on Maryville's roster, and then one super hot shot player, M&S or Scary Jerry. That's sort of the comparison that I'm making, like maybe not someone that we expected to get picked up, but we're super glad that they did. Scary Jerry, this guy is a smurf, Grapes.
Yep, so the roster, Niles, Auto Orange, Get Back, Scary Jerry, and Zyko. You might remember Niles from his time on Golden Guardians, and Get Back maybe from his time on Pentanet GG in the Oceanian League back in, I believe, 2020. And I think overall, just like a team of veterans that could potentially get to that next level, or just kind of our really top tier players, that kind of screams C9 to me. And again, the added addition of some new players, the Scary Jerry kind of being this hot new prospect, kind of like M&S, who has been showing up recently, and also Zyko, who I actually, in my little description that I just wrote out, like some small notes, I compared Zyko to Tomio in terms of a player that is still relatively new, but has quickly become one of the top players within their team. So that was my other additional comparison to Maryville. And it's not, again, just as easy as saying like, oh, C9's in first place, Maryville's in first place. There's other reasons behind it.
I did just think of a funny comparison that's kind of negative that I hadn't thought of until right now. I'm going to say it, no flame, but also top laners that have gone to the next level and then come back down. Very good top laners. But
he was your B1 in the draft. So.
He was my B1 in the draft.
Let's move on to our next team. Who will be playing against Maryville in the maybe potentially the second round of this group stage. University of St. Trevor, who are seated at number 8 with a 3-2 record. Now, you might recognize the initials US and T. That's because this is largely the University of St. Thomas roster with a couple of adjustments here and there. So two quote-unquote collegiate teams in this group. Porsche Katoro, Savage, maybe Robbie, don't exactly know what's happening there. Their ADC is Aang and support Dapshin. Who are we comparing these teams to, Hawk?
Okay, Grapes. So my comparison for this team,
Oh.
we were like on this one as well. Yeah. So FlyQuest Challengers. Wow. Okay, we're starting it off with two of the same, but FlyQuest Challengers. Grapes, honestly, you had a pretty good comparison for this one, which is honestly it pretty much swayed me. But basically, they're sticking within a tried and true established top side of the map, especially if Robbie Bob comes back. And then their bot lane is comprised of like an ADC that was like pretty unexpected. Like Aang, we knew nothing about going into NACLQ. And then Daption, who were also Winsome for FlyQuest Challengers, are supports that sort of have been around on other teams, but are new to this team.
Yeah, shout out Aang, who had a couple of really nice games in the Open
Yeah.
Qualifier. Didn't get to
He was
catch any
better
of the
than a
VODs,
lot of
but
people gave him credit for.
looking at the damage numbers as well as the KDAs, because of course watching 80 VODs in 2 days combined with having to watch 36 NACL VODs, not really possible. But overall, like I think the St. Trevor team is going to be pretty interesting. Porsche Kitsuo and Robbie Bob, of course, all won CELO together last year, as well as being on Team Pending, which was a team in PGCQ last year that was really interesting. So I really do like this comparison.
Yeah.
And of course, if we're thinking about the core, Masu was kind of the Aang of last year with this team. So another
Definitely.
little
True. Yeah, you're right. I forgot Masu played like kind of in Team Pending was more or less this team last year. So yeah, there you go. All right, Grapes. We got Godel.
Godel Gamers, 3-2. They are the 9 seed. They have Last Trickster, Dave Smalls, and Detro. This is maybe the first time that we differ a little bit because Hawk, have Evil Geniuses Challengers as the comparison for this roster.
Which I want to hear this. I want to hear your logic behind this.
So this is not a comparison of their original supposed team. It's more of like what they've been in the last couple of weeks. I know that Trickster and Detro specifically were kind of shopping around teams in the in the qualifiers until kind of the last second, and built this squad together with some other players that are relatively new. And if you think about it, kind of similar to the way that Evil Genius's Challengers team has been running. They have a couple of quote unquote veterans with some also very new pieces if we consider Robbie Bob and Mobility to be part of that team. And also this team's gonna be carried by their jungler, so that's another option as well.
That's the best part of the comparison because for anyone that hasn't been watching NACL, Shaden dude might be the best player in the whole league, but this guy's fucking crazy. But okay, I can see that. So I went with IMT because honestly, this is probably flimsier logic than yours, but to me, IMT was the most random roster out of all of them for me in the NACL, and Godel is the most random roster to me. It's okay, super veteran Trickster, some new pieces, sort of feels a little all over the place. I know who some of their players are. I'm not as familiar with others. So I kind of just settled on IMT. And the biggest thing as well is I also not only is a little bit of a random roster for me, I'm not super high on the roster. I don't think IMT is that great. I don't think Godel is going to get out of groups. But that's not to say I don't like a lot of the pieces on this roster. It's more so it was ones that I wasn't expecting. For example, like I said, a big Trickster fan. Also seeing Detro down there at support is awesome. It's sort of I was Detro coming back to support here on Godel. Wixie comeback player getting back into NACL/Academy on this team. So there are some parallels in terms of narratives for me, as far as some players that I really like, some players that I don't know as much about. And that to me just sort of is it's an interesting roster.
Yeah, I definitely see the logic, especially just players that you weren't expecting to be in the league. ADD Balulu, last Damon. I don't know. Davemon was it's a Pike streamer. He actually did stream all of their games on the OQs, his POV, if you want to go check that out. I'm sure they're still on his Twitch at the time of recording this podcast. So that's going to be a pretty interesting team. We have some very disparate comparisons, but that's our
we definitely went different directions, but I like it.
Yeah. Our final team in Group A is Conviction, and this was a team that we got to watch the last matchup with Hawk on our stream against University of California, Irvine. They have Voxtrick, Ivan, Aljun, Nightstar, and Nukes. My comparison was FlyFam. Your comparison was CLG Challengers.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest with everyone. This was the last team that I did, so it was kind of a throwaway comparison.
Yeah, it's you have one team and they kind of don't match, but you're gonna find a way to put them together anyway.
They're not all gonna be perfect, right? I feel the first 8 that I did, I was oh yeah, and then the next the next 4, I was okay, yeah, and then the last 4, I was
It's like when you have a lot of stuff, like you have like a couple of like random things in your fridge and you're trying to put together a meal. That's like the last couple of teams for us here. And so I guess this was the last rank for you.
Yeah, definitely. This was like the eggs that I found at the back of the fridge that I'm not sure if they're safe to eat, but
well, tell us about the comparison.
So I will explain my logic. So in the one game we saw out of Conviction, I felt like it was a team that was filled with a lot of players that could be really great. Even going into the OQ, I was sort of like, there's some people on here that I at least recognize could be really good, played on some decent teams. And they're also, I don't feel like, kind of like CLG Challenger, not getting like crazy hard carried by one player in particular, but they are succeeding with really great team play. And also, we talked about Kevy earlier. I think like Kevy, for example, was the best performing player on CLG Challenger at the moment. Ivan was awesome in the game that we saw them play as well. And like Nightstar really popped off. So that's sort of my flimsy logic on this.
I'm gonna keep this one short. FlyFam has 4 new players with an established AD carry. Conviction has 4 new players with an established AD carry. Nightstar has been around in amateur for
Sword is a new player.
New player to his position in his role.
Okay, all right.
I guess. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, I feel like my general feelings about both of these rosters are very similar in that their AD carry is going to play well, and it's about how the rest of the team does that will determine if they end up taking that next step in terms of either getting into the playoffs or performing well in the promotion relegation tournament, or even avoiding that altogether for FlyFam.
Yeah, fair enough. That's more than fair.
So that was our Group A teams. Let's move on to Group B, starting with Team Fish Taco. 4-1. They were our number 1 seeded team. Who do we got, Hawk?
I got AoE. I basically my comparison for Team Fish Taco is AoE because they've got a veteran jungler and a very veteran top laner. Even though Winnie hasn't been in Academy / NACL for a while, this dude, like, he's been around for a long time in the scene in general. And sort of getting back to this level. Gamsu, likewise, just been playing at that Academy level for a little while now. Very, very established player. They've got some more hype aspects in mid and ADC. Comp9, EU Red compared to Dark Wings and Lynx. Just like Comp9, Dark Wings, maybe not the best comparison, but EU Red and Lynx, 2 very hype ADCs that are sort of like new to where they're playing now. And then also the big one for me as well was Winter and Skytech. The comparison that I drew was sort of both on a comeback arc. Skytech, once again, back sort of at this NACL level after getting dropped from Academy last spring. And Winter, after taking the better part of last year off, now back on Team Fish Taco looking ready to play. So I feel like also this team sort of plays similarly, where they got some hot shot carries, but really it's the rock in the jungle that sort of holds the team together.
Yep, Dardoch looked very good. He's currently rank 1. Did you know that?
Is he?
Yeah, rank 1 on the ladder.
Good for him.
And also now jungler for Team Fish Taco. And my comparison for Team Fish Taco is actually Dignitas. And this is why I will tell you this. First of all, again, similar to Cloud9 and Maryville, like, they're at the top of the table right now, and so like top of the standings definitely played a factor here. But also, their top jungles have both played in the LCS before. They have a support that is kind of a veteran of the space that they're currently in. Winter has been in North American Amateur for years, and Diamond has been in Academy for years. And also, they have a couple of newer pieces that maybe are being slept on a little bit. Now, this might not be necessarily considered like parallel for roles, but I think that Hoon and XU in Academy are very similar to the way Comp9 and EU Red are being considered right now for Academy as players we don't know too much about, but maybe are going to start to show up down the line.
That's fair. That's fair. I can see that. But
okay.
Grapes, we're on to TonyTop just to keep things moving. TonyTop, Wallflower, who we all believe to be iconic, renamed Sudsy, Levitate Snow 2. This team was really hyped coming into the OQ. As Grapes and I talked about earlier, sort of dropped the ball a little bit, but they still went 3-2. Number 7 seed, Grapes. Where you got them?
So this is my AoE team, and here's why. The team is built to win, which again was kind of the point of of AoE and NACL. And they have a very, very strong top side of the map. You look at TonyTop, who's kind of probably like a mid-tier Academy player at this point. Iconic, who has been both an LCS and Academy. And Sudsy, who back in 2021 was one of the best mid laners in the amateur space. And then they have a bot lane that maybe is not necessarily supposed to be at the top of the table, but is going to be pretty solid. And if they take that next step in Levitate and Snow 2 versus Lynx and Skytech, who I would say Lynx and Skytech have been playing pretty well in NACL right now, that's what takes this team to that next stage.
Okay, I can see it. Grapes, my comparison for this one was super simple. I spent about 5 seconds on this.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
Right.
I'm super excited about their top side. That's the logic. I love their top side because we talked all about it in the tier list, right? Like, I love the top side of EG, but like the rest of it, I'm like, it's cool. That's how I feel about TonyTop. I know Sudsy was like a beast in 2021. I wasn't really around then. I've heard all about it. I've seen a couple VODs, but like I don't hold this like nostalgia. So I'm just like, man, their top laner, their jungler. I look at this roster, I'm like, oh, it's a banger. Some real hype talent here. And then the rest of it, I'm like, it's good. It's awesome. I like them.
Yeah, so top side of the map is where we definitely were looking for this team, regardless of the teams that we compared them to. And their first round opponent is going to be Mirage, who are seated at number 10 with a 3-2 record. They have Barrack, Hyphy, Ariandel, Goodboy, and Pawkus. My comparison here, Hawk, was Immortals Challengers. What was yours?
I had Dig. So we're kind of like hitting all the same teams, just in different spots. Okay, I want to hear about your logic for Immortals Challengers. Mine was like a little flimsy, so maybe you had like a really strong reason.
Here we go. Canada is the minor region of North American Amateur. There are 2 minor region players on Immortals Challengers in ADD from LLA and Balulu from Turkey. Mirage has Canadian people. They have Goodboy, who I believe is very Canadian. I believe Pawkus is also from Canada, so that counts. And also, they're just kind of a bunch of veterans who I think are going to be around the middle of the pack.
Grapes, I'm trying to figure out if this is like big brain or if this was your throwaway team.
No. If we're going to go a little bit deeper, I think that this team has a bunch of players that I'm relatively excited about, but maybe not super excited about. And I think that was kind of my thought process about Immortals as well.
Okay, we at least have the same sort of thought process on Immortals. Honestly, my thought process about Dig is kind of similar to yours, where I think they have some pieces I was really excited about, some pieces I was less excited about, but overall, like I think top to bottom, they have a competitive roster. That's sort of where I was at with this one.
Sounds about right. I mean, I don't know if Mirage is going to be as good as Dignitas right now in the NACL, but maybe that's your hot take. We'll see about that. A lot of very established players.
I don't necessarily. Yeah, I should say I did not rate my players based on like how, or rather teams, how good I thought they would be for pretty much all of them. I want to preface that. Like, I don't think Mirage is going to top cut or something. Maybe, but
I think I had like some of them where I really made that connection and some of them where I didn't. So that's
fair. Yeah, that's totally fair.
Last team of Group B is the 15 seed Enigma, who got in, I believe, off of a 3-1 actually, and then falling in the last game after upsetting a couple of teams. They have Cocoa Puffs,
that sounds right to me.
Dunks, Zhao Danny, Enthralled, and Cerulean. Who did you compare this team with, Hawk?
So I had Golden Guardians for this team because in the one game that we saw of Enigma, we saw 2 players on their team go absolutely fucking ham, and then the rest of their team like be good. Like no fun. Like Coco and Enthralled just like really showed up in that one game, and so that's sort of I feel like that really I'm drawing this comparison to Golden Guardians, where I feel like Young and Array have really been showing up for Golden Guardians Challenger, but the rest of the team has looked not very good in their losses, and then just sort of like decent in their wins, and really I think there's 2 catalysts for the team. Whether or not that is true through all of Enigma's games, I don't know. I didn't watch the rest of their VODs. I'm sorry. But based on the one game I saw, it's like 2 players really popped off. And we also had Cocoa Puffs on the show. Shout out Cocoa Puffs. You were really fun to talk to. Yeah. So sort of like cool players that you could build a roster around. So that's sort of where I'm at.
Yeah, so I have CLG Faith. I kind of took the teams that I thought were going to be towards like the bottom half and kind of NACLQ and compare them to the provisional teams, because I think that the way that they're built is kind of similar. CLG Faith have a couple of players that I'm very excited about, or that have looked good in periods of time in the past, whether that be NXI or Sketch. I think Cocoa Puffs has looked really good. Was in the Team Liquid tryouts actually for the top lane pool. Didn't of course get in. That's why he's here. But also I believe Dunks has had a couple of good moments on some of the teams that he's been on in the past, and also Enthralled looked really good as well. But I'm not completely sold on the entire team, and that's why very similar to the CLG Faith, I kind of have them as being mirror of each other a little bit.
Fair enough. But Grapes, the number 3 seed, we're going on to Group C now, Native Gaming. We both had them as our number 1 seed going, and they did fall to Maryville in the 5-0 match, but still coming into 4-1, they looked really good. Shocky Fnatic messages scooped Rhino. I know we had the same comparison for this one. How about you draw it for us?
Let me set the scene for you guys really quick. It's the end of 2022.
Like, everyone close their eyes. Yeah.
The kings of the scene have just, again, been dominant. And then 4 of the players move on to other things. One of them remains. And that one of them is Fnatic, and it is Bradley on Team Liquid Challenger. And those players are now one of the best players in their respective leagues, and they have a team built around them that has a lot of really promising players and a lot of really experienced players as well, whether it's Arrow versus Scooped, Shocky versus maybe Kim Down in the bot lane, or Rhino versus Arrow, just like players that kind of all are a big mixed bag, but all are going to come together and form something good, but maybe not as good as the team that came before, which was either 100 Next or that TL Academy team that had 3 players promoted to LCS.
Yeah, honestly, you took the words right out of my mouth. It really is just like this one. I rated a little bit in terms of like performance expectation as well, but like I think this is just a really good team filled with like it's just that mix of like veterans and prospects that Team Liquid went for that made this a super easy comparison for me. Honestly, I think it's really easy for me just to draw the comparison between Messages and APA, Shocky and Kim Down, Rhino and Mir, Scooped and Arrow, and then Fnatic and Bradley for the reasons you said. So I don't really have much else to say. I'm just really hyped about this team. I'm really hyped about Team Liquid Challengers. I think they're going to be good, and it's that mix. I think it makes it pretty clear cut.
Yeah, and presuming that both of these teams make it through into the second round of GSL, their potential opponents in that second half of the group stage is going to be pretty interesting as we go on to our next team. Team Ambition is a team that I think a lot of people were hyped on when their roster got announced. They have Cozy, Sarcasm, Talon, Aaron, and Pluto Hawk. Who do you have compared to them?
I got Cincinnati Fear because this is a team that I think is filled from top to bottom with players that have all sort of been around an amateur for like a bit, like at least a year, and looked good. But there's not a single member of this team that I'm like over the moon hyped about. And so that I think that's honestly it. And also like Fear has been playing pretty well, maybe relative to what people expected. That's also where I've got Team Ambition. I think this team might surprise some people, look really, really good. But Grapes, I see you got 100 Thieves. That one I'm sort of interested in.
Might have been one of my more flimsy ones.
Okay.
100 Thieves have one of the hypest young prospects in the league in General Sniper. Team Ambition have Talon on their team. I know we're kind of connecting, or maybe stretching stretching a little bit. But
I'm sure Talon will be elated to hear you compare them to General Sniper.
Talon had some really good moments last year.
Talon is great. Yeah.
And I'm very excited to see him maybe take a next step with the team because we're surrounded by players who I think are all very good. The other interesting thing that the other connection I have with this team in 100 Thieves is they both have like a bunch of really solid players who have been around for a while, whether that's Pretty and Destiny over on 100 Thieves, or Aaron and Pluto, or even Sarcasm, who's been around either as like a coach or a player now again on Team Ambition. The biggest thing that this team doesn't really strike me as compared to 100 Thieves is they don't have like an Unforgiven, where it's like a really established player who's going to come in as the top player in that league. But
yeah,
I kind of like some of the other points that I made. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. I actually saw your 100 Thieves, and I considered it for a bit. I found a better 100 Thieves, I think. But yeah, I could see that. That's sort of where I went with the Fear, where I don't feel like they have that Unforgiven, right? I'm sort of like, they got some hype prospects, but they've also got like some established stuff there. But like overall, I feel like it's very well rounded, and that's where I kind of settled on Fear. But now On to the next one, number 11 seed Winthrop University. Mabud, Frost Force, Ivano, ZKG, and Sir Kenji Graves.
Okay, my comparison is Wildcard Gaming, and here is why. Wildcard Gaming and Winthrop both had very good runs last year, or at least the core rosters within them. Of course, Wildcard consists of AOE Ginger Turmeric. They made it really far into PG in the summer split. And Winthrop had a really good showing in spring split of 2022, where they made it to top 4, entered Proving Grounds eventually as well. But a team that had good performances in the past and have a lot of the players sticking together, but I'm not as confident in them returning to that level of success, especially because a couple of the new roster changes. I know ZKG looked very, very good. There's a reason mobility's in Academy right now, right? So that's my comparison kind of with Wixie and Lens, where their replacements are still good, maybe not as great potentially. But if Winthrop is playing like Wildcard, and this comparison really is true, then maybe this team will shock people in this group that, again, I was considering to be a potential exciting one out of the 4 that we have.
That's a really interesting logic to me, because I honestly, this was one of the ones when I saw it when I was doing mine that I was sort of like, I would not have said that like at all. So I'm interested to hear. So I went TSM because I think Winthrop is filled with a lot of players that have been around for a bit. And also, I did not expect great things from, but maybe got some unjust criticism as well. I mean, seriously, ZKG kind of shut me up. I'll give credit for that. Like, ZKG played really well in the OQ, and I was pretty down on the bot lane. So, there you go. But
this is my comparison for TSM. Frost Force and Kenji won big things in the past.
There you go. Yeah, no, exactly.
TSM has had some people that have won big things in the past as well.
And also, I will say, too, have not quite reached that peak as when they won in the past as well. So that's sort of where I'm at for TSM. And I'm also still not expecting amazing things out of Winthrop, even though, like, they did prove me wrong. They made the group stage. I'm not entirely, like, they will compete, but I'm not going to, like, bet on them to get out.
We'll see how accurate you are about that, and if more memes will be made about you on Twitter as we head to our
I'm sure
last
they
team.
will. I'm waiting for it. I love it. Shout out Winthrop. Love you all.
CB Gaming is our last team in Group C. Phenom X, Kiznote, Nem9, Last Dance Sandwich. This is the team that beat Team Fish Taco in that round 3 to qualify in at 3-0. Who is your comparison, Hawk?
All right, Graves, this one's going to get clipped on Twitter. Y'all better get your clip tool ready. I have Wildcard Gaming because they started off hot, but they're not going to be able to keep it up.
Woo! That's
it. That's the take.
If you're in the chat right now, if you're watching this episode, clip it. And once CB Gaming, you make it into the group stage, yes, we can make a really funny meme and a funny montage.
I'm so ready for people to clip this, or for Wildcard to finish the season like they have 3 losses right now, right? So they'll finish the season like I don't know how many games they're gonna play, 30-3.
That might happen, might not happen. We'll
but that's it. That's the take.
I had Fear in this spot because it is 5 players that have kind of been on the precipice of making it into that into this level, whether it's making it into amateur, making it into academy. But maybe people weren't as sold on them. But when they came together, they took down some of the top teams and could potentially be pretty good. CB Gaming beat Team Fish Taco. Fear have had some pretty good games, both against TL Challengers specifically, as well as I think they went 1-1 against Immortals as well. Again, a pretty surprising roster, and maybe can make some waves. But I guess you're not as high on them.
Honestly, it's not about me not being high on them. Honestly, I am excited about the CB roster, but you're such an optimist, man. Like,
I'm an optimist about all these teams. Yeah,
I would love if CB Gaming did well. But what do I think's going to happen? That's what I think's going to happen, and that's why I chose Wildcard. So, anyway, we're on to Group D. I'm sure I'll get added for that, but hey, it's all fun, right? So.
Yep, we got 4 teams left. We're going to cover the last group here with our number 4 seed, Horizon Gaming. A pretty exciting roster that was put together seemingly not, again, something that we weren't necessarily expecting, with Sappy, Nidhogg, Yunbi, Sophist Sage, and Dragonman Kim role swapping from jungle to support. Who do you got here, Hawk?
So, for this one, this is one of the ones I did not do based on performance, because I do think this team will be good, and FlyFam has obviously struggled just a little bit, but Horizon, I had as FlyFam because no one fucking knew who this top laner was at all before this tournament. But the rest of the team was, like, filled with, like, there's a comeback player, sort of like how Goo came back, Yunbi. Yunbi coming back. You've got like some hype prospects like Nidhogg or Blaze, and like a bot lane that is interesting and has played together. That's sort of my thing. The big one was like unknown top, comeback player, and then like prospects.
Hey, Instinct and Sword were both on TSM at one point, not at the same time. And Sophist Stage and DMK were on Bay State College at some point in the same time. And those two formed the core around Golden Guardians, which is my comparison for this team.
Also role swap support as well. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, role swap support. As a Prismal role swap support as well. Wow. We are
just
coming up with
there we go.
The spot.
Oh my god.
Wait,
did you not realize that either? That makes me feel better about that.
Wasn't in my notes, so maybe I thought about it at one point, but not why I've selected them here.
Awesome.
Horizon Gaming has some really good players with the core sticking together, whether it be for Golden Guardians, Concept, Array, and Prismal, or for Horizon, Sophist Stage, and Dragonman Kim kind of being that connection together. But they also have some new players joining, whether it be a rookie with Young, Sappy or Nidhogg in a way, and a returning player, whether that is Rosethorn on Golden Guardians or Yunbi, who was also on Golden Guardians Academy back in 2021.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like our logic is actually kind of similar for both these teams. We just sort of chose different teams, you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
I like it.
All right, we got 3 teams left.
Three
Supernova,
teams.
Dragoon, Hyper, Onat, Azog, and Chookies. This is good. This is, of course, the closest in terms of top 2 seeds. So,
yes,
potentially a very explosive round 2 matchup in the GSL. Who do you got as the comparison, Hawk?
I have 100 Thieves because I was... Honestly, the biggest part, I was really, really hyped about 100 Thieves. I'm really, really hyped about Supernova. I still love this roster. I'm a big Supernova fan right now. I know you are too. Also, Dragoon is the best top laner outside of maybe TonyTop. Sniper is like Sniper. You know, that's we both sort of drew the Sniper comparison with our 100 Thieves. Also, they are stacked with talent from top to bottom. Some of it's a little newer. I feel like Onat, you could draw a comparison maybe with Yukino. And then a lot of experience, a lot of talent across the board for the rest of it. And most importantly, it's just very exciting to me.
Who's your Unforgiven on this team? Is it Azog? Hyper?
My Unforgiven on this team, I think... So I think Hyper...
I guess we both don't really have that.
Yeah, I don't think there's really... Because Hyper would be my pretty, I think. And then I think... Honestly, if I were to pick an Unforgiven, it would maybe be Chookies, just because I think...
Ooh. Wow.
But like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's just not Azog's. That's not like, I like Azog.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have one. So that is sort of the flaw in the 100. I don't really think any of the provisional teams have an Unforgiven though.
Yeah, like maybe
like
TonyTop,
first
but
team all pro in LEC to NACL is crazy, dude. Like that's an insane. Like I don't know what to compare to that.
My Supernova comparison was CLG Challengers, just because I think they have a lot of really solid players. They'll probably be near the top of the table. A newer mid laner, I think comparing Copy to Onat is probably the biggest question mark of this comparison here. But I think Onat's like a very promising player. Copy a little bit more established, obviously. But yeah, a bunch of really solid players going to finish near the top of the standings. How close to the top will kind of just be determined by both their play and also kind of the player teams around them at their skill level.
Bunch of hype players seems to be the consensus, but Grapes, 2 more teams, and it's time to get lit here on the Salty Runback stream. We got Livacious, Munchie, Conveying, Sajed, and Chei. What's the comparison?
I think we both had the same one for this one. It is TL Faith. That will give you a funny reason and also like a pretty serious reason. One, I think it's a bunch of players that have deserved a chance on a team at this level of competition. Whether it was Livacious on MSU, Munchie, who has looked really good on third party at times, and Conveying, Sajid, and Chai have all had moments like either in tryouts or just like pretty high ranked in solo queue or maybe some of the lower levels like UPL. And also we both compared TL Challengers to Native and Lit Esports. All 5 of these players were in the Native Gaming tryouts back in December. So
I did hear.
If we're looking at a B team for Native, it's kind of lit.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's I did hear about that. That was not really what factored in. Honestly, this was one of my flimsier ones, but I could see where you were going with it, so I followed your logic where it's a good mix of like hype prospects of players that we haven't really seen a lot of, and also hype prospects of players that we have seen more of. Like Munchie, really exciting player. I actually think there's a pretty good comparison to City Witty.
Yeah, they're both junglers that like to do crazy shit. And
yeah, they like to do crazy shit, and they're held in really high regard as well. Yeah, I think this one's pretty cut and dry. Grapes, we can go on to the last one. We're at about hour 10. We're doing pretty well on time. It is, of course, going to be the ISU Redbirds. We got Meslo, we got GFP, we got Drew Dozer, Disconnector, and Tempos.
All right. I had TSM Challengers. They were the one team that I have not selected yet. You have CLG Faith. Maybe you want to go first because I think this is a pretty interesting comparison.
Okay, so mine, it's like 50%. No, it's like 30% serious, 70% CLG Faith went 0-2 in OQ and then went 3-2 and then made it. That's they're like
you mean
the
like
team
last year?
Last year. That's what I think of when I think of
Okay.
like, because it's another one. They were like the 12 seed. I think ISU was seeded a little lower, but it's like mid low teen seed. Like people expect like to do well. Some people expect to do not as well. And then they come in, they start 0-2 and then they 3-2 on the back half of the day and make it. Like that was a crazy storyline. We were all like, oh my God, is CLG Faith like LCS affiliate going to get out? Same thing with ISU. That's honestly the big part of my comparison here, but also it's sort of, I feel like I can't predict ISU to do well. I can't really predict CLG Faith to do well. I do think that there are exciting pieces on this team, sort of like CLG Faith, but none of them I think are necessarily like I expect them to get promoted within the year. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I like a lot of the players on CLG Faith, but I think it's sort of like a trial run in NACL for quite a few of them. And similar to the Redbirds, even though a lot of them have been around longer, it's same thing where I'm not like, oh, why isn't this player in NACL, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that I do see the comparison there. I was a little bit hesitant at first, but some of that logic does make sense.
It's really the 0-2 to 3-2 thing, because I just
Yeah.
remember on broadcast we were all freaking out that CLG Faith was going to 0-3 bomb out. Because also
they
like,
lost to DK Crew in round 2, who were like the underseeded team.
well, wasn't DK Crew like the 32?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
they lost.
like they lost to DK Crew. We're like, well, they lost to the 32 seed. Also, this is like after we had Myra. She came on the reveal show and was like hyping up town, gave an interview, and we're like, God, like they fucking suck. Like, and then they made it. So like
So
they
it's
didn't
not
suck.
it's not current CLG Faith. It's more
No,
old
this is
CLG
an old
Faith.
CLG. So it's a little bit of like, I guess, like drawing storylines from 2021. But as far as players, I am drawing comparison to current CLG Faith. So I'm kind of cheating, I guess. But it's just what I think of CLG Faith. That's what I think of.
TSM Challengers and Redbirds both have a ton of players that have been together for a long time. You look at the middle of the map for Redbirds, GFP, Drew Dozer, and Disconnector. They have been on this ISU team for what seems like 2 or 3 years at this point, and consistently have had pretty good levels of success in collegiate. I know that TSM, obviously the 3 players that we're talking about in Haunter, Senskaren, and Wild Turtle, have had more success relatively to how Redbirds have done, but they've been together for a while. And they've played. They have a lot of experience together. And the other 2 players on these teams are one promising player that probably is not at the top of the pool, but is certainly worthy of having a spot in NACL/NACLQ, and that is Meslo and Doxa. And they both have a support that is currently playing because they were ganked by Oceania. Whether it is Draku not playing and now Rock/Chime is in, or Tempos is in because Nausicaa is ineligible to play on this team because of certain visa restrictions.
Honestly, that logic makes a lot of sense. I actually could really see your TSM logic even as I was doing this, but I like my Winthrop TSM. So that makes a lot of sense, though. I liked it. Ganked by Oceania, but Graves, I hope this like gave everyone like a good overview. We just went through 32 teams in like a half hour.
This might have been really confusing. I'm just kind of realizing, like, if you're not following along, I am sorry, and you just maybe heard us ramble for 45 minutes. But I thought it's a good way to. We thought it was a good way to talk about all of the teams, and hopefully it made you a little bit more excited potentially for the NACL qualifiers, which will again be starting on Saturday. There will be streams both on team streams and also on our channel, twitch.tv/saltyrunback and twitch.tv/smaxhide. We're kind of doing like an unofficial, official sort of coverage to make sure that all the games are being covered either on our streams or on team streams. And we're going to have some pretty cool content prepared for that. So we're very excited to get that project started. And hopefully this gave you a little bit more excitement about them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. More than anything, we just want to canvas this NACLQ season that's going to start because, again, we talked so much about it in our first episode as well about how great the NACL is for the top level. But that doesn't mean that the NACLQ matters even less. And we are so excited to be platforming these teams, these games. We're also, again, we're going to have a lot of great talent on the show. I'm sure Grapes and I will get a call at some point. But you know, we'll have all kinds of really, really great people on. It'll be very entertaining. Definitely want to check that out. As Grapes said, we'll be going pretty much every weekend, I think. So it'll be awesome. Make sure as well, that's the end of this episode 3. We hope you all enjoyed this show. We'll still be bringing you this content every single Wednesday evening. Make sure to follow us on all of our socials at Salty Runback Pod on everything: Twitch, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and Twitter. Shoot us a DM if you want to tell us something. Shoot us an email at saltyrunbackpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. A suggestion. You can flame us. I don't know. Whatever you want to say. We like talking to all of you. And hey, if you think that we said some stupid stuff, maybe you didn't like that I compared CB Gaming to Wildcard, you can take it with a grain of salt. I've been Hawk. That's been Grapes. Have a good night, everyone.